This is FLOSS Weekly. I'm Doc Searls. This week, Shawn Powers and I talk with Daryl O'Donnell about digital identity, SSI, that's self-sovereign identity, why it's taking off and you need to know about it, things we didn't know beforehand, like the mobile driver's license, didn't know that was a thing yet, it will be, and how all this stuff hangs together, how it's going to come into the world, how you need to be involved in developing it, and that is all coming up next.
Podcasts you love
from people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is FLOSS Weekly episode 670, recorded Wednesday, March 2, 2022, SSI and digital wallets. This episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Kolide, that's Kolide with a K, K-O-L-I-D-E. Get endpoint management that puts the user first. Visit kolide.com/twit to learn more and activate a free 14-day trial today. No credit card required. Hello again, everybody. Whenever it is, wherever you are, I am Doc Searls, and this is FLOSS Weekly. And I am joined this week by the great brain of Shawn Powers himself, right there.
And the rest of me, too.
And the rest of you too, and your office, and the rest of it. And has the snow even begun to melt in?
No, it's so cold. It was. Let's see. Actually, it's over 20 degrees today. It was single digits this morning, but yeah. Also, today's going to be interesting. I have two puppies sleeping on my office floor. So if the mailman comes, I expect pure chaos to ensue. So
it's 61 already here in Bloomington, Indiana, which is where I am. So our guest today is Daryl O'Donnell. Have you studied up on Daryl before the show at all?
A little bit, only enough to know that my questions will probably not be quite up to par with what he's going to tell us. So I'm looking forward to learn and then have responsive questions. So that's my
that's
how
good.
I'm planning
You're
to
good
go
at
into
that.
this.
I think it's very open-ended, and we can make it work. We both
as I was studying, I'm like, you know what? I would really like to talk to this guy so I can figure out how to talk to this guy. So I think it's going to go well.
There's a loop there. Excellent. Okay, so let's jump into it. I have to let you know that this episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Kolide. That's Kolide with a K, K-O-L-I-D-E. Kolide is a new take on endpoint management that asks the question, how can we get end users more involved? This is in contrast to old school device management tools like MDM, which lock down your employees' devices without considering their needs or even attempting to educate them about the security of their laptop. Kolide is built by like-minded security practitioners who in the past saw just how much MDM was disrupting their end users, often frustrating them so bad that they would throw up their hands and just switch to their personal laptops without telling anyone. In that scenario, everyone loses. Kolide, on the other hand, is different. Instead of locking down a device, Kolide takes a user-focused approach that communicates security recommendations to your employees directly on Slack. After Kolide is set up, device security turns from a black and white state into a dynamic conversation. This conversation starts with the end users installing the endpoint agent on their own through a guided process that happens right inside their first Slack message. From there, Kolide regularly sends employees recommendations when their device is in an insecure state. This can range from simple problems like the screen lock not being set correctly to hard to solve and nuanced issues like asking people to secure two-factor backup codes sitting in their downloads folder properly. And because it's talking directly to employees, Kolide is educating them about the company's policies and how to best keep their devices secure using real tangible examples, not theoretical scenarios. Kolide, cross-platform endpoint management for Linux, Mac, and Windows devices that puts end users first for teams that Slack. Get endpoint management that puts the user first. Visit kolide.com/twit to learn more and activate a free 14-day trial today. No credit card required. Visit kolide.com/twit today. Okay, our guest today on FLOSS Weekly is Daryl O'Donnell. I know Daryl from having heard him on my wife's computer talking in committees and things like that. She's all over self-sovereign identity as a thing, and Daryl's like an alpha voice in there. He runs something called Continuum Loop Inc., a boutique consultancy specialized in development and application of decentralized identity. I'm going to read you a little bio here. He's helping organizations of all sizes get decentralized identity deployed operationally, and open source software plays a huge part in that. He's involved with numerous open foundations. For example, he's one of the founders of the Trust Over IP Foundation, which is part of the Linux Foundation. So Daryl, I know you're there. Come on in. There he is. So you're somewhere in Canada, I think. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm in Ottawa, Canada. So yeah, I hear you, Shawn, about the cold.
Yeah,
I'll see you're in Michigan, and I'm going to raise you one Ontario.
It's Ottawa is brutal. It's the only capital colder. It's much colder than Moscow, but it's
really wow.
What is it? Ulaanbaatar, the capital of Mongolia, is the only colder capital on the planet. Really?
Wow.
But I'm moving to Vancouver. So.
Oh, that's sweet. Wow. Well, then you'll. That's a whole different kind of warm. It's the most lateral move you can make in Canada. So let me start by asking a question at which you may have an answer to. You and I have been around the identity thing for a long time, and as a topic, there is an absolutely unusual number of Canadians in this thing. Kalia Young and Kim Cameron, now who sadly lost, but Pamela Dingle, who's running a lot of, if not all of identity for Microsoft now, and many others. What is it? The cold? Is it some other thing? Is it pure coincidence? Is it? What's that about?
Well, you got to do something. You got to do something in the winter, right? I think it's part of it comes down to a couple things. One, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, the government started investing some money and doing some thinking on it, but also that we're a very strange federation. So Canada's government model is not hierarchical. So the federal government is not on top of the provinces like in many other countries. They're peers of the provinces and territories. So we have this really weird environment that in order for it to work, it has to be collaborative. There's no way for the federal government to put a mandate down to say, hey, you're not going to get your funding unless you follow. I remember it was HSPD 12 or something, an identity thing that came out of the presidential office. We don't have that in Canada. So it has to work through collaboration. I think that's why. I'm not sure, because everybody asks that, why so many damn Canadians?
It's kind of amazing. It's a source of fun. So tell me about, like, we've had a number of people. We've had Phil Windley, and we've had Kalia on, who I mentioned earlier, and some other people involved in SSI, decentralized, distributed identity, and all that. I've been working on identity myself in the sense that I show up at conferences and say stuff that's working, but and writing, of course. But that was a rock that a lot of us have been pushing uphill for a long time, going back into the last millennium. But with SSI, and by whatever name, it's kind of like got over the top, and now it's kind of rolling downhill as a snowball with a lot of stuff going on there. Can you give us a kind of summary of where that's at, and especially where the open and free parts of it are?
Yeah, I mean, I never started out as an identity wonk. I had my own startups. One of them was providing search and rescue for the global community, both on the civilian, so airplanes, vessels, aeronautical, maritime, but also ended up being used in combat search and rescue. And I would say 10 to 15, maybe 20% of my budget at times was messing around with identity, because there's a business problem there that's quite simple. The officer in charge is the officer in charge. The fact that the officer in charge happens to be Daryl O'Donnell is not the relevant point. It's Daryl O'Donnell's fulfilling that role. We spent so much time on identity that when little things started happening, Federation, I heard of the new Federation. I went and spent a bunch of time and money with ForgeRock because it was open source, and I realized it's just another Federation. Whatever happens with the federated solutions, you always end up saying, is this the Federation that I can trust? And someone is going to say no. So what really changed back, 2015, 17 timeframe, when we started to realize that there was a way for us to give up the need to control everything. This is where blockchain came into play. I don't actually use the word blockchain very often anymore. There was a source of truth that we could all agree upon where we just anchored a very small amount of information, which started to break down the really weird way we do identity right now when it's not decentralized. Best analogy I've heard is John Jordan from Government of BC says, Doc, if I wanted to talk with you, I'd have to talk through Shawn, and Shawn would whisper in your ear and then whisper in my ear as we went along. That's effectively what we're doing right now with identity. What's starting to happen with SSI, like any tech, is everyone wants to try and control it. You can't. You can't control identity because by nature, and actually you're one of the best thinkers on, what is trust. It's my decision if I want to trust you. You can share as much as you like, but I, at the end of the day, decide that. The SSI world is starting to actually realize that they can't control the source. So groups like, the Sovereign Foundation was created. All the code was open source out of Evernym. It's now sitting at Hyperledger. So the foundational pieces, pretty much by definition, must be open source, because otherwise I don't know if I can trust it. I don't know how I can use it, or I'm stuck using a vendor, and we don't want that vendor lock-in. But yeah, we're seeing in the last probably year, the biggest shift that I'm seeing in the SSI, and I use decentralized identity a little more because self-sovereign wraps people around the axle too easily. The biggest shift in the last year is that I would call the purists, thou shalt follow all 12 SSI principles, which haven't honestly been proven in the wild long enough for us to know that those are really the principles. But if you don't follow all 12, you're not pure. I was like, that's fine. At least I'll make forward progress and get stuff done and make business work better, make my life work better. So I'm seeing a shift right now where it's more operational and business focused. And when I say business, I just mean getting stuff done focused, not money focused. Does that help, Doc?
Yeah. Could I interject a question? So I followed you for the most part, but my ignorance will show a little bit. Could you elaborate? What do you mean by federated when it comes to identity? You kind of lost me there just with terminology.
Yeah, so federated is you're using another company or group of companies to log in with. So the best federated example that we see on a day-to-day basis is log in with Google, log in with Facebook. And we did see at one point log in with Twitter, log in with LinkedIn. Well, when people stopped supporting that, it no longer worked. And if I don't like LinkedIn or I don't like Facebook, which I personally don't use log in with Facebook, what am I stuck with? And what people don't realize on the other end, if I'm a company, small store, and I have login with Facebook, they are in control of my customer list. That's mortifying to me.
Yeah.
Does that help on Federation?
Yes, exactly. So this is like the OpenID that used to be around and
OpenID is huge. Yeah.
Okay.
OpenID is the language that's talked when you do the login with Facebook, login with Google. It's the tech language up behind that. The question is who were you logging in with? Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
I might add here that there's both OpenID and OAuth as standards, as basically open standards. The original idea behind that was actually kind of a self-sovereign one. It's like, how can we, how can we make life easier for users, right? So, because we're all individuals, like the life of Brian taught us, and including the guy who says I'm not. But there's a but the idea was to make it easier for people, and what we ended up with was log in with Google. And the funny thing is that there were efforts back then to say, okay, well, it doesn't have to be with them. It'll be with some independent organization, but it still went that way, and it kind of required having a whole new approach.
I'm seeing that it's actually going to end up that way, Doc. The hard part is no one really connected the dots on exactly how many things had to be in place before that could even be remotely feasible for a regular human.
Okay. I want to put in a word for self-sovereign, because I understand why people get wrapped around the axle with it, especially because there are some people who are saying sovereignty is, it's a sort of like absolutely libertarian, almost political stance, but it's not really. It's just that we are in fact all individuals, and so we ought to have some autonomy here and an instrument of our own. So how? Let me start with wallets, because this has become a thing. Ideally, we all carry wallets around in the physical world, and we carry in them what in the SSI world we call verifiable credentials, right? I've got a bunch of verifiable credentials, like my driver's license, but I don't want. I want something like that online, right? I want something like that in the digital world, where, unlike the physical world, I don't have to give you my whole driver's license. You don't have to look at the whole thing. You just have to know I'm over 18, or I'm licensed to drive in BC, which you will be eventually, or some other thing like that, right? Because it's kind of confining the interest of the other party to the one thing they need to know about you, which may not even be your name, right? Meaning identity isn't really about your name. Your identity is about something else. It's about these verifiable credentials. So how do we get the world to use those? Maybe you want to say a little more about how those work?
Yeah, so there's when I switch over, I'll grab the book that we both know Drummond Reed very well. Probably one of the people who introduced us. There's a book on self-sovereign identity that does a really good discussion. Well, I'll say a fairly good discussion on wallets and the agents that are going to help us, take care of our lives. It's the chapter that I wrote of the book. The thing about digital wallets is, especially, there's two kinds of people we need to talk to about digital wallets, because the crypto space already knows, sort of. They think they know what a digital wallet is when it comes to identity, but there's a very, very big difference that they may not understand. There it is. The rest of folks just want things to work. So if I go and say, for example, the US, that was one of our clients, is Bonify. They do member pass. Credit unions resisted contactless payment because it was too hard for them to do and too hard for their users to do. But the minute that COVID hit, contactless payment went from number 10 on the priority list to number 1 because no one wanted to touch anything. So this is ritual of using the wallet, pulling things out. But digitally speaking, how do I do that? How do I do an Apple Pay experience, but for my driver's license? How do I do an Apple Pay-like experience to share my vaccine passport, which right now, it's, not horrendous, but we still have the mandates here, just ended in restaurants, where I have to show my driver's license and then show the live QR code on my phone. It's painful. I just want to tap my phone and for the other person to know he's good to enter. And I don't need his name. I don't need to know his middle name. I just need to know, hey, that's roughly him, and or it's been authenticated by someone I trust. The wallet is the key there, much like the browsers 10, 20 years ago. Maybe it was 30 years ago. Geez. Where we ended up with the browser wars for the long time, when I still remember, even in the last couple of years, seeing somewhere that a government system required IE6, Internet Explorer 6, still, because they had never upgraded the systems. We ended up with vendor lock-in. I want to have a wallet just like today. I can take my driver's license and put it in another wallet, walk out, I can put it in my pocket, put it in the back of my phone, and it should work. I want my wallets to do the same when that's possible. Sometimes it won't be, though. Oh, I mentioned the crypto wallet. The big difference that people think, hey, not your keys, not your coin, those people have their own, quote, wallets, don't understand about digital identity is that with a crypto wallet, if you have your mnemonic, your seed phrase, you can type it into a new wallet, a new instance of the wallet. It'll go through the chain and rehydrate itself, and right bang, you're back to current. Exactly all the information you had is now in your hand. What they fail to understand on the digital identity wallets is your digital wallet has the only copy of the information. So the digital version of that driver's license is sitting in your digital wallet. If you lose your phone, you need to get another copy of that driver's license. You can't just go back to the blockchain because none of the private data is written to the blockchain, which may or may not be a little bit too specific.
Well, so what's the solution? I mean, I'm kind of following you, right? And
Yep.
My question is, how can we abstract the front end and the back end so that the wallet is a little bit less the issue, and there should be some sort of standardization for the back end. I don't know what that means. Maybe that's why you are in business. But I guess what is the answer? This is the second or third SSI show, and maybe not all on TWiT, but like it's Doc's thing, right? So I've done podcasts with Doc quite a bit, and so my question is usually, okay, I see all of these issues, so what do we do? And I guess where do you see, if it's not possible right now to do some of these things, what are the next practical steps for us to get to the point where, our driver's license is something that exists digitally in a way that we can change wallets or interfaces and, not lose it if we lose our phone. And, right now I have all sorts of, like 12-word phrases written on a piece of paper in my safe. I mean, if that's how we do things, great. But is that where we're going with everything, where we have some sort of a backup so that we can restore these things if we lose them? I guess just where do you see this going in a practical sense? I get that there's issues, so solve them for me.
To me, the number one issue is backup and recovery. And what I see is the following. We did a research paper on this, which is where the background for the chapter of the book came from. Many people in the crypto space are very capable of maintaining those 12, 15, or 24 word seed phrases and putting them in their safe and not doing something stupid like throwing them out. Bluntly, I'm not capable of doing that myself. I need someone to help protect me from me. I'm a scatterbrain. I'm an ideas guy. I'm a problem solver, but I'm not good at maintaining that information. I need someone I can trust to help take care of my digital assets. That doesn't mean I want to give away control totally like a custodial solution where at Coinbase or somebody is a custodian of my stuff and could intervene and cut me off. But I want something where I can back it up. I know that there's a company that has regulatory control that they can't take over my life by accessing the backup. Because if my backup and recovery process is easy, that's where I'm going to be attacked. That's the easiest attack vector is a poor recovery mechanism that lets you, Shawn, pretend that you're me and you take over. So I looked, okay, cool. Who knows how to protect things like this? And actually, I think we're going to end up with either independent third parties or telcos, banks, those regulated institutions that give me recourse if they do screw me over. I do have to, and their recovery, they're not able to take over and act for me, but they're part of my recovery. When we get to that point, I think we're going to be in better shape. But in the meantime, all of the working SSI solutions I've seen are what I would call single purpose. Whether it be member pass with a credential for your credit union, not 9 credit unions, 1 credit union. Worst case, you lose that. It's like losing your debit card. You call up the credit union, go through the security protocol again, get a new one, and you're off to the races. It's when I have 50 things in my wallet and lose it that I'm really in trouble.
Okay, so part of what all the cool kids are doing with Web3 and DeFi, all of the cool buzzwords right now, right? The whole idea that keeps getting pushed is that it can be a trustless world where we don't have to have somebody that we can trust to do that. Are you suggesting that maybe that's a false narrative, and maybe that's a fallacy, that we shouldn't be trying to do something that doesn't involve a trusted party of some sort?
I think we have to have the ability to have third parties. I don't want to enforce it, meaning thou shalt use a third party. That I think is absolutely beyond the pale.
Oh, okay.
I look at this. Here's one of my Web3 things. If I lose this, yes, I have a way of recovering. If I find the thing and I haven't forgotten where I've put it, which for me, that's about a 6-week window of memory because I have no idea where things are, other than I hope I put them and didn't take them out of the safe and put them somewhere weird. But I want the option of working with a trusted credit union. I want the option as well. Part of that is I'm in Ontario, and there's an Ontario credit union I'm a member of that does not operate in British Columbia when I move. So I'm moving to a different credit union. I want to be able to move that on my terms, my choice. But I also want to understand that there's some rules of the road that this isn't, Bubba's little hacking ring that's going to run for 3 years, build up a huge amount of social capital and crypto capital, and then run away with it all later. So I think we have to have the option there. I listened to a really, really, really good podcast on Web3 and how they're starting to link, Doc. The addresses aren't necessarily a really good thing to sign things with because they're perpetually there. But how do we separate and use identity behind that? And they also said they figured about 99% of folks would want to have a trusted, potentially regulated third party. And then those Web3 people right now who are always the early, really innovators, right? They may always run their own. I won't. I do now because I have to. I will not continue with that. I might for very specific things, but largely speaking, I don't want to wake up in the middle of the night worrying about that kind of thing because I am very capable of screwing that up. I actually threw away a crypto recovery QR code, and 2 days later had a little brain bubble going, hey, dude, that was your backup recovery for that new account you just set up. Wouldn't have lost much, but it would have been measured in thousands of dollars. Does that help?
It does. And it gets us into several territories at once. I want to say first, for those listening and not watching, what you were holding up and you said this was a USB stick. Just so, yeah. Your analogy with banks is really interesting because we do trust banks. We do trust, stockbrokers. We do trust intermediate lawyers. They're these intermediaries who are highly regulated, sworn to secrecy, culpable, auditable, all of those things. And the thing with all of those, though, as examples, is they're dealing with one thing, right? Your bank has got your money, or maybe they have a loan, and so you have obligations with the bank, but they're pretty simple. With identity, there are all of our old friend Kim Cameron said he called himself the committee of the whole because who he is when he played music, and who he is when he when he's walking down the street, and who he is when he's given a lecture, all different things. In addition, who he is when he's teaching French to English people or vice versa was other characters, right? So, and we are all these many things, but the interesting thing to me about, the relevant thing really to me about SSI is it doesn't start with who we are, except in the sense that we're the ones that have the private key that unlocks all this other stuff. But we can be known on a need to know minimal disclosure basis. So I'm wondering a whole bunch of things here. One is, even though there's a lot of development going on already, we don't have, most of us don't have SSI wallets. Actually I have like 3 or 4 of them. They're all in a folder on my phone. I don't use them yet. I've got things in them because I'm experimenting with them, but I don't know who the intermediary I would be using is. I can imagine there are some that might be involved. One of the wallets is Trinsic. Okay. So would they be an intermediary, or are they just the guys that make the wallet that I have in my pocket, much as like Gucci makes a wallet you can put in your pocket? I'm not clear on what the roles here might be, or what the thing is that's going to get us to use this might be.
Yeah, I think what Trinsic to me would be a tech provider that trusted party may use, in my mind at least. Now, Trinsic may spin up a third-party service, but right now they're principally a great team, principally a technology provider company, but their customers, who are the developers using their kit, may very well become that third-party provider. But yeah, you're right. I have a bunch of apps on my phone that I use only for looking at, seeing what the state of the, quote, state of the art is. They're generally speaking clunky and developer-centric. But my view is that in the next year or two, you'll have SSI, you just won't know it. It's just single purpose. Like people who have MemberPass, they don't know what SSI is, nor do they care. It just works better. That's all. That's all. If it works, it's much more natural.
Is there a future where there's a standardized back end? And sorry, I interjected. See, I thought a question. No, so now I have them. Yeah. Because what you mentioned, Doc, you know, I mean, are we going to like, oh, what wallet does my doctor use? Am I going to have like all, you know, 100 wallets, one for every platform that, you know, somebody might happen to use? I mean, I think that's, if we're in a place now, that's where we are. There is no standard other than maybe a standard of expectations, but even that's pretty low. So will there be a standardized back end? Is that where we'll eventually go? Or are we kind of just looking at a future of whoever is the most convenient and offers the lowest price for entry for companies to adopt? Is that where we're at now?
What's nice is we're sort of at that now, except you're only getting single use case. What's nice is the community itself is very active in looking at these standards and interoperability requirements, so that you could have kind of a vault in the cloud that is mine, yet it's run on AWS by my bank, by a telco, by a trusted third party. That's all standards based, meaning if I want to move, I just move and the standard says Daryl's moving. Done. Those are all being worked on. What's difficult and what's hard about the innovators in the SSI space is we tend to paint over how many things have to be in place for that to actually work. So even just the wallet, I'm working with some governments right now where they are really going to set over time the standards. And when I say the standards, I mean the what's working and which of the standards, because there are many flavors right now, actually get adoption. Because they're the ones who are in control of some documents that we use on a regular basis: driver's licenses, passports, health cards. And they're only going to pick a few standards, and they're going to have requirements. Typically a government, certainly in Canada and the EU, very privacy-centric. The US, little less privacy, but still fairly, and also very more self-sovereign libertarian leaning. Those standards are already in play. What bothers me, or not bothers me, but I guess it frustrates, is the SSI community, the decentralized identity community, tends to think it's further ahead on the interoperability standardization work. I use the phrase, it's kind of a smart-ass phrase called premature interoperability and premature standardization, meaning we're trying to set up and define interoperability and the standards when we haven't quite figured out exactly what it is we need. So the good news is it's starting to already happen. And most of the players out there are recognizing, some of the really big players are recognizing they can't control this one. Because if they try, they kind of get quiet smackdowns from some of the other big players in the market that say, no, this is a really bad idea. We can't control this. We have to influence it. We have to support it. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to have to know that I must buy an Apple phone because the government ID only works on Apple. That's not a solution.
That raises for me the question, because you just mentioned the big guys. I really like that this is the kind of thing that the big guys can't control. So I'm wondering what will get them interested, or if we want them interested. Do we want Google, Facebook, Apple, and the rest of them, especially Google and Apple, which provide us our phones pretty much exclusively at this point, at least in most countries. So I'm wondering, if you're Apple or you are Google or a Samsung, a big Google OEM, and you say, I could put a wallet on here, and for that matter, I could, invite Trinsic or any of the other companies that are making wallets to be on here. What's my role? What role do I want to play here? And how in other words, let's just say Apple or Google says, you know what, this is going to happen. We want to help. What do we do?
Yeah. So that's where, if you take a look at the analogy, is I would say there's sort of a closed system that's being deployed right now, the mobile driver's license, MDL. When I say it's closed, I mean it is in theory open, but it requires vendor participation, and it requires, for example, I wouldn't want to be the small police force that now has to acquire hardware and or software services that aren't capable of reading an MDL because they've licensed the model. But Apple's already playing there, and you have to wonder why. Once we get enough inertia, which we're seeing probably 10 or so different government projects all looking to the same stack, which is not MDL, which is something that Google and Apple and Samsung, you nailed it on the three of those. Those are absolutely crucial because Samsung does have its own way of doing some of this stuff. Once they recognize that they can't be you don't hear Apple driver's license, you hear Apple supports MDL. Great. Well, what about a health card? What about a digital photo card? Those could in theory be MDL, but why would the government go through and pay the fees for that when there are better, free, more open ways to do so? And then I would look at the wallet report that we created kind of concluded that in time, some of the wallet capabilities must and will end up in the operating system, because I don't want to have my bank app have its own way of interfacing with wallets and another credit union app and a health app of 3 different health apps that have to actually interact with each other. And I have to say yes to all this crap. I just want my agent and my phone to do the work. I believe that those mobile operators will recognize that this is a standard by which they can really digitally enable a bunch of capabilities. And without it, they create closed ecosystems, and they know how that ends at a nation state level. It may work in the Apple ecosystem very well. I'm an Apple guy. I've got a MacBook. I don't know how many Apple devices I have. But that said, I don't want them in charge of my digital life totally. Does that help, Doc?
Yeah. I'm also driving things in the back channel here. I had not heard of a mobile driver's license before now, and that's really interesting that Apple would want to get into that. I think that there's really there ought to be an opportunity here. Did you have something there, Shawn? I don't know if I just heard you cough. That
was me.
That wasn't me. I mean, I do have thoughts here, but go ahead, Doc. You can finish what you were saying.
No. My finish is that I think it touched on something really important there, which is the epiphany that companies can have, a big company like an Apple or a Google can have when they realize that they're going to have to participate in an open ecosystem. I'm thinking of Apple when it was clear that browsers were going to happen and the internet was going to happen. And they came up with, I forget the name of it. It was really stupid. It was a complete knockoff of AOL. They thought, we want to have an online service. We want to control it, and it's going to be AOL. It's going to be like AOL. Yeah. We'll compete with AOL. To heck with this internet thing, right? And about 5 minutes went by before they realized that was a losing thing, and the browser was going to win, and the internet was everybody, and they better be in it. Yep. And they invented Safari or whatever its predecessor was, and it's so in a way, the bigs are in the business with browsers already. They're in the business with browsers, and they're in the business with email. I mean, you can take your Gmail account and put it on something under your desk if you want to, because the IMAP and POP3 and SMTP are open standards, and MBOX, and there are a bunch of standards that you can apply here, and they totally work. So something like that ought to happen here, has to happen here for this to succeed, don't you think?
Well, that is actually part of my question too. So the mobile driver's license specifically, I just keep saying standards. I feel like Ballmer saying developers, but
just don't show me your armpits, dude.
So are we to the point where the mobile driver's license is based on a standard, or is this just an Apple thing? Because if it's a standard, that's pretty cool.
It is a standard. It's a ISO. I don't know the numbers. People in our space roll it off, but it's an ISO standard specifically aimed at mobile driver's licenses that can be used for other things. But it's one of these things like, well, I could also build my own database from scratch. Why the heck would I? Mm-hmm. There are standards for all of the things we've talked about, by the way. The standard for the credential that's put in my wallet, the standard for how I get a credential into my wallet or out of my wallet. How do you say, hey, I need your proof of age of majority. You're over 21 because you want to buy this thing, and I don't want to see your address. That's all standard, becoming standardized, just not quite ready yet. The MDL standard, which is interesting, you showed the page there about the Apple announcement. There was also an announcement that said, hey, listen, Apple's a brilliant company. They already understand, Doc, as you get it, that a walled garden is not the answer. So they're actually the one I would say are the horse to watch in this. They're just really quiet, as they always are. There was a bit of a smackdown in the news when they were when the terms of the contract that the states that were signing up to MDL were what the states were required, because Apple said, thou shalt provide the following resources to Apple for us to support your driver's license in our phone. And the state somebody in the state realized, what did we just do? We just committed a state government to be beholden to a contractor. Somebody said, whoa, back up the truck. And they realized that that's probably a bad idea. And what it is Apple, in the right way, they are strong influencers, but part of their model is they control a lot, and they do a really good job with that control. This is an area you cannot control this. You can influence it, you can participate in it. If you try to control it, you are not in charge of issuing a government document. The government is. So there was this interesting control thing that was pulled back. They pulled back on that because of the terms of that contract. That's the kind of fight we're going to have, those little things. And people say, I have a standard that I can use. It's free. It works everywhere, as opposed to the one that the government has to keep paying and is beholden to a contract. That's not going to win.
What happens behind the scenes with the MDL? I realize that you're not here representing the whole MDL concept, but it's something that's tangible, so it's fun to talk about. Where is this data stored? Do states keep their records current behind the scenes, and there's some sort of communication that takes place with the wallet system? Or what actually happens? I mean, what is actually happening with an MDL? Because, like, for example, here in Michigan, you can have a digital proof of insurance, but it's just a picture of, like, a graphic of your proof of insurance card. So, I mean, it's got to be more than that, right? So what's actually happening?
I'll give you how it happens in the SSI world, because MDL has its own kind of variant of it, but it's very, very similar. The whole idea is there really are 3 or 4 players, however you want to look at this. You have an issuer, so the DMV. Department of Motor Vehicles still has what I would call its system of truth, its source of truth in the background, system, what do they call it, a system of record. That is the actual big database. It's behind 9 levels of firewall, so you can't just talk to it. Only the police can ever talk to that one to say, hey, just got this driver's license. Is Daryl still licensed? They're going through a highly secure system, reach back in and saying, hey, is Daryl's license still valid? Because it looks fine in person. Keep that in mind, because we're going to talk about that digitally. So they go through and they say, hey, this is really Daryl. Daryl's sitting at a service counter or on video and saying, yep, we're happy, we're satisfied. This is actually Daryl. We're going to issue him a digital version that goes on. So basically, I'm the holder. I get to hold on to this credential. Okay, it's in my wallet. At that point, I now have my wallet in my hand, on my device. Later, let's talk about 2 different things. I get pulled over, or I go to buy some alcohol. I need to prove my age. If I get pulled over, the police officer, if I hand him my physical driver's license, is going to hold it, grab it, walk back to the vehicle, call it in, type it in, whatever. It's going to reach into the current system. That's my physical one. With my digital one, he can immediately say, yep, this came from Daryl's phone. There's a cryptographic process that says Daryl is the guy holding this credential. He also can say, and it was issued by that was called the decentralized identifier of the DMV. Because he has a list of all of the DMV, of his own DMV at least. He knows if it's signed by that's my DMV. What happens out of state, out of country, we'll get into that. They can now verify this is real, and they can ask another question, has it been revoked? And they can do it all digitally, offline, meaning if you meet me in the backwoods of Montana or backwoods of the northern Michigan where there is no cell coverage, you can still answer the question, is this really Daryl's? Whereas if he can't get online, he can't even answer that question. So it's the same ritual that happens, but the question becomes, what happens if you take your Michigan driver's license and come into Ontario? How does Ontario know? Because they don't know who the DMV is. We need to have a list of who those real issuers are. Who are the official issuers? Because there's only I think there's 15 in Canada, and I don't know if there's 50 plus a few in the States. Does that help, Shawn, or have I gone a little too far?
No, it does help, because I was just curious what happens behind the scenes, and yeah, that does help. I'm still a little bit curious how the offline stuff works. Is there syncing? I mean, that must come into play at some point.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, how to ensure the authenticity. But yeah, that does help a lot. Yeah, I'll probably have more questions, but let them percolate.
My joke on this is that all of that thinking that you're wondering is that if I was in high school, I would, when I was 17, probably be issuing for $20 digital driver's license from the slowest province or state in North America, because they wouldn't be ready for me. They wouldn't be ready yet, and I would just use the digital driver's license from New Brunswick or New Hampshire or something. How you authenticate the validity of it is pretty important too, because I mean, I could take a screenshot of somebody else's phone and show that to the guy at the liquor counter and like, oh yeah, sure enough, you are, you really are 87, young man. Yeah, this one is actually, digitally speaking, it's probably, I don't know what the factor is, but it is much more robust than showing a card. In California, there have been times when the fraud officers cannot identify physical fake driver's license. They must pull against the DMV to check it. Banks can't do that. They can't pull against the DMV. They have no way to check a physical device more than what you see in your hand. And it's almost impossible to tell the difference at times. Cool. So now, digitally, they can't do that.
And I'm curious the interface with the police officer. And here's my quick story why I'm curious. Our local school district is playing district basketball this week, and they're being really cutting edge, and you have to buy your tickets digitally. And there's no ticket taker. You buy them, and then it's a horribly convoluted system that shows up on your phone. And you'd think it'd just be a QR code that they scan, but it's not. You go in there and you actually have to click the redeem button, and the people take your phone and press the button for you and give your phone back, which is how that's better than buying a paper ticket is beyond me. But I'm curious how the interface goes, with a police officer. The police officer takes a phone and then my wife says, oh my gosh, did he pull you over? And that pops up on the screen, is it that ugly cop that we saw at the donut shop? I don't want him to see that while he's running my plates or whatever.
Well, and that's where we really get into the open versus closed ecosystem part of this. Because I imagine, the officer comes up and has his phone and I don't know if you guys remember Bump, the old Bump thing.
Oh, yeah.
It was like you bump phones. Never took off. I'm like, damn it. But imagine the officer comes up and says, I need to see your license. And your phone just says, hey, there's somebody within 10 feet of me asking, need to see your driver's license. By the way, we know he's a bona fide police officer. I'll tell you that. Your phone says, hey, do you want to share your driver's license? And it says, we suggest you do. You just go, bink, and you share it. The ritual is there, but here's the open source for open versus closed ecosystem problem that I have. Imagine your small town police force has to go buy and or pay a license to the vendor because it is a closed licensed ecosystem to do that. I'm pretty sure your police force does not need something more. It must purchase, right?
Yeah.
That's what I want is open. I want that wide open so that there can be open source and or low cost based on open source solutions as opposed to pure vendor driven licensed models, because we know what happens to the pricing when you create that closed system.
Yeah. Like the police officer with his 3 different phones and 3 different platforms bumping your phone. Yeah. It's just lots of problems there.
Yeah. I pulled out the wrong device and I sent them photos instead. Sorry.
So I have a thought and a question. The first thought is, once this is going, once it becomes normalized, that people assume that on my phone, because if they have a wallet on their phone, it's the phone. The phone has something in it that contains the phone is the meta container for all your credentials, right? So I'm thinking here, I'm at a university in Indiana. It's a big university. If I have I have a bunch of credit. This wouldn't be me. It'd be somebody who's more typically involved with the university, right? You're faculty, you're a student. There's a whole bunch of credentials that come with this. I'm a graduate or I'm not a graduate. I'm on a scholarship. I have a parking pass. That's a big one, right? Because parking, I think, is going to get solved with this in a lot of ways.
Yep.
Where all you do is you come up to it. Maybe you produce the QR code that the Gizmo scans, and then or there's some NF near field or some other mechanism, whatever it is. Phone meets system. System cares only about one thing, and then you're going. So where that goes in the long run is, and we've talked here before with Phil Windley, I think, about PICOs, which are when everything you own has its own identity as well, right? I'm talking through a mic here and a boom and a computer and there are speakers here that are Logitech speakers. The time will come that there will be a whole new normal where when Logitech sells me the speaker, I get a bunch of credentials with that, and they get one too that says I'm an actual customer. I have a way of communicating with them. Well, this is all a good thing in so many ways. What is it? Makes service easier. It makes communications with the company easier. It makes the conduit through which information could pass more rich potentially. There's lots of ways this goes, but also suddenly there's a big burden on my end of, oh my gosh, what knows all this stuff, right? It's a big pile of stuff, and you kind of do need that intermediary in there. If I want to be in the SSI business, I think I want to be that agent. I want to be somewhere in there, as long as but I'm wondering whether, just because I think that we need agents to do a lot of things for us.
Yep.
But I don't think there's a shape of that yet. And I don't think on the big company end, you mentioned the credit unions earlier and MemberPass. As I recall, I haven't looked at MemberPass in a while. The idea behind MemberPass was any credit union, not just one credit union, but any credit union. Here's how you deal with a credit union, and you have your collection of credit unions credentials that are embodied in or somehow contained in your MemberPass. But that's like one big industry trying to make something work that really needs to be more distributed than that, and across many other industries. Yeah. And so I'm wondering if there are any stories of other things that are happening. That the mobile credit card, the mobile phone is sort of an interesting one. Are there any others that are sort of moving in that direction?
Here's another sort of flavor of that. And you mentioned agents. Agents are, I just did a presentation at the W3C yesterday, World Wide Web Consortium.
And then,
saying,
hey,
what did we get
ones
wrong?
doing the DID standard, right? The digital
doing the fighting over the DID
earlier.
Standard as well, as well as the verifiable credential standard.
Right.
Pointing out with the wallet report, which came out in 2019, what did we get wrong? Agents is one that we got wrong in the following, in that I'm surprised 3 years later, but I'm not surprised as well, that we don't have those agents acting for me. The first one, and I didn't finish my analogy yet because I'm a scatterbrain, Shawn was asking about, the driver's license and how do we verify with the police officer. I also want my phone to, when I walk into a bar or a liquor store and I need to prove my age, to say, hey, someone just asked for your age of majority. It's a restaurant or a liquor store. The wallet says, we recommend you say yes, but you have the right to say no. And I say yes, and it just does it because it knows, like you said, the context of this is a store. It's asking for age majority. It's a licensed establishment. It should be asking. It's a normal question. But if I walk into the next pub and it says, hey, I'd like your full driver's license, address, height, weight, eye color, picture, all of this stuff, I want my wallet to say, dude, that's weird. I want my agent to make that. This is not normal. This is not a police officer. This is someone asking for your private information. Do you want to say no? We recommend no. And then a second thing, which I'm not sure what the privacy laws are where you are, but here in Ontario and in BC, we also would probably have an option to say, do you want us to report them to the privacy commissioner? Because they're doing the wrong thing. That's the first agent I see as being real. There's a really good podcast with, I don't know if you know Charlie Walton, who was MasterCard, is now at Avast, which recently acquired Evernym, one of the players in SSI. He is looking. He describes I think he uses in the podcast the term concierge, where there's someone that just takes care of me and my stuff, but it works for me. It's hosted by someone, run by somebody, but it is my agent taking care of my devices, my health files, all that kind of stuff, so that we have a place to go so that I can build the agents on top of that. Does that make sense, Doc?
Yeah, it does. We're also getting down into the short rows here. And I know from looking at the background here, you're also involved with the Trust Over IP Foundation.
Yes.
Which is part of the Linux Foundation. And the Linux Foundation is especially interesting to me because it's sort of this United Nations of big companies that are working on common open things. In other words, where they're not wanting to do the only work on it. So how does it tell us more about that? And given that we've
so Trust we founded, there's a group of there's a group of 4 or 5 people, and I think actually your lovely wife was down at the meeting, one of the meetings that happened that created it. What we've looked at is TCP/IP really solidified over a long period of time. And no one messes with TCP/IP now. They just adapt to it. It works. It does its job really, really well, but it didn't have security built in. What we're looking at is what are the layers of information and how do we help industry understand that there's 2 things at play here. One is the tech stack itself, and tech needs to work. But in Shawn, I think you were kind of alluding to this, is the tech stack has to work alongside governance, those rules of standards and interoperability and what are the rules of the road. Trust Over IP is built on the premise that there is both governance and technology that works in lockstep to help us build a trust layer for the internet, so that I know that when I want to chat with you, Doc, that I know it's you. It's really you, and somebody's either vouched for you, as opposed to Signal. I get a secret code that I don't think anybody ever actually uses. That I don't have to worry as much anymore about how do I communicate with you to do secure stuff, because it's just baked in. That's the mission for Trust Over IP. And it's got membership ranging from the tiniest of tiny, like companies like myself, through to some of the biggest companies on the planet, to like IBM. And we're all kind of in agreement. And I would say in the last 6 months, I lead the technology stack working group, and we've had an architecture task force that has probably been the most intense, kind of like the questions, Shawn, you were asking about. They're starting to answer exactly that in real detail, that says, we have standards here. We know what interoperability looks like here. And over here, we've been too vague. We need to fix this. So it's doing a real fantastic job, the Trust Over IP Foundation. I'm happy to have been a founding and funding member of that. Definitely a really good foundation.
Well, we're getting down towards the end here, and we always finish up with 4 things, and one of them is
my homework.
Oh no, there's no homework required. The first you've actually already covered, because it's one of our control questions, which is, well, first let me go. Is there anything that we haven't asked that you'd like us to have asked that you could answer in short order rather than long?
Nothing in particular comes to mind. No.
Okay, cool. I want somebody to say, "I'll take the 5th" or something like that, but nobody has ever done that. Anyway,
we had some of the truck protesters say that. It's like, honey, you're in Canada. We don't got the 5th.
I know. I was going to say, as soon as I said the 5th, I realized you don't have that. Anyway, you probably have something like it, and probably some of the things that are better. Anyway, the next is, this is the one I've already covered, is do you have anything to say about blockchain? I think my question on that briefly would be, you mentioned blockchain. Does SSI require blockchain? I don't believe it has to. That's just one implementation, is it not?
It doesn't require it. You need to answer the question, what's the source of truth we can all agree on? Blockchain good. Checks that box fairly easily. There are definitely other ways to do it, and people are using trusted databases, DNS, whatever. Yep. You don't. It's not a must-use blockchain thing. No.
Cool. And the last 2, which are, what's your favorite text editor and scripting language, if you have some? I suspect you're not a programmer.
I am not going to say VI.
Oh, really?
I alternate. I'm actually recently fairly pleased with VS Code, Visual Studio Code, because I'm on the Mac. But I also use what's my WebStorm is I alternate between the two because most of my text editing is about plant UML modeling. Oh, and scripting is Python.
Excellent. Wow. Well, you're more geeky than I expected. So this is great.
I'm a recovered software developer.
Oh, very good. Very good. I probably should have started there, right? My joke about this is the only code I know is Morse. So I'm not. I was the least geeky and longest serving editor with Linux Journal. I managed to.
We had a business partner say to us, "Hey, I want to help out. What language should I learn?" When we looked and went, Spanish.
Right.
See.
Wow. Yeah. Well, there's oh gosh, I just thought of something, but it would be political. We're not supposed to talk that, so I won't. Anyway, Daryl, it's been awesome having you on the show. Thank you so much, man.
Well, thank you very much for having it, and say hi to Joyce for me. Shawn, it was awesome meeting you, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and I came away knowing far more than I came in, so that's always how I like to have the show end. So thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah, this is great. I think this has been a really good SSI show, as it were. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So Shawn, you just kind of gave us an advance on what you got out of it. Anything more on that? Or?
If I watch back what I said at the beginning, I think it was, I think we were recording when I'm like, I don't even know what to ask yet. So I'm hoping to get enough information so I know what to ask. And yeah, we got that. I think my issue with all of our discussions, ours meaning yours and mine in the various podcasts that we appear on together, it's always this very abstract conceptual thing because it's so early in the implementation of it. And I really like to see okay, but what does that look like on a Tuesday sort of thing? And that, things like the digital driver's license, that helps me see where things could go. And then helps me think of more questions, okay, well, what does a back end look like? And what's really happening if something like this happens? So I enjoyed this episode because I learned enough to ask questions that I think were beneficial to myself and hopefully to listeners as well.
So, boy, there's more, but several things. First of all, I need your plug, and then I'm going to go into two other plugs.
Okay. Oh, my plug, I don't know, just whatever, my lower third. So I finished recently a Linux Essentials course on YouTube. That's me on every thumbnail, which seems fairly self-serving now, but it's free.
We want you to serve
the whole course. And I'm doing a lot of stuff on YouTube recently. So check me out there. And that is the and I have a cartoon. Yeah. If you like cartoons or if you like webtoons, I'm approaching a year. The end of March will be a full year of drawing a webcomic. So next time I'm on, maybe I'll plug that. Oh, there it is. Thank you, Ant. Yeah, that is today. Ukrainian themed characters today. So
that's for those listening in the future, it locates it now in time. Okay, yes. Thanks, man. And So a couple more. Next week, we have Matt Mullenweg on, Matt Mullenweg of WordPress fame. That's a don't miss it show. I mean, he's a very high profile dude. He's done an amazing job over the last decade and a half or something like that with WordPress. If you care about WordPress, be here next week. And Club TWiT. So joining Club TWiT is another great way to support our network, the TWiT network. As a member, you get access to ad-free versions of all the shows on TWiT, as well as other great benefits. There's a bonus TWiT Plus feed that includes footage and discussions that didn't make the final show edit, as well as bonus shows we have, such as the Giz Fizz and other monthly members-only content, including AMAs and fireside chats. There's lots there. There's also the community aspect of this thing. We have a really fun Discord server that's available only for Club TWiT members. Is it a GIF or a GIF? Whatever you ask the Discord, I'm sure you'll get a very passionate answer. So sign up, Club TWiT, for just $7 a month. Head over to twit.tv/Club TWiT and join today. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week with Matt Mullenweg. I'm Doc Searls, and this is Floss Weekly.
If you are looking for a midweek update on the week's tech news, I got to tell you, you got to check out Tech News Weekly. See, it's all kind of built in there with the title. You get to learn about the news in tech that matters. Every Thursday, Jason Howell and I talk to the people making and breaking the tech news, get their insights and their interesting stories. It's a great show to check out, twit.tv/TNW.